Hello, everyone. This is Attorney Robin McCoy with Attorney Tracy Martin, and this is Political Coffee with Robin and Tracy. And we have our special guest today, Representative David LaGrand. And we always like to start with our drink of the day. I've got my U of M mug and I've got my tea. I know this is a double header. We just had a very exciting interview with Commissioner Monique Baker McCormick. So I've got the U of M mug, and I'm drinking for this segment, I'm drinking mint tea with lemon and honey. And Tracy, what about you?
Yes, good afternoon, Robin, and good afternoon, Your Honor. State Representative David LaGrand, we're gonna see what he's got brewing in his cup or mug. But today I brought my like and comment and share and subscribe mug. We're asking people to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our new YouTube channel, Political Coffee, because what you're about to hear today from Representative LaGrand, who's really the chief architect of the new expungement laws rolling out tomorrow called Michigan's Clean Slate Law. He's chief architect. He's a noted authority, and we're going to hear more from him about how he's been called upon to testify in other jurisdictions and other states about his work here in Michigan, which has caused Michigan to be a national leader. And inside my mug, because it is called Political Coffee. I defer to you.
Okay, and then Representative LaGrand, so by way of brief introduction, so he is serving his third term representing the 75th House District, which encompasses a portion of the city of Grand Rapids. He went to Calvin College, U of M, one of my alma maters, and University of Chicago Law School, one of my other alma maters for undergrad. So shout out to U of M, U of C, Calvin College too. Before his election to the House, he served on the Grand Rapids City Commission and the Grand Rapids Board of Education. He's a small business owner and entrepreneur. He started a construction firm in college, Four Friends Coffee Shop in 1994, Wealthy Street Bakery in 2002, and currently owns a Long Road Distillers in Grand Rapids. He has worked as a lawyer at Warner Norcross Judd before serving 8 years as a Kent County Assistant Prosecutor. In 2000, he entered his own private practice. In the House, he's focused on improving the lives of Grand Rapidians, fully investing in education, supporting small businesses to help them create good paying jobs, protecting the environment, reforms to the criminal justice system and government transparency. He's a native of Grand Rapids and lives in the city with his wife, Melissa, and 4 children, and they attend Eastern Avenue Christian Reformed Church. And so welcome, Representative LaGrand. I know that I was introduced to you. I'd reached out to Representative Ronnie Peterson, who we've also interviewed him on our show. And I said, hey, we're doing this expungement. We've been doing these forums, but we want to link up with the state reps that are doing a thing, that are making change in the system. And you were the first one that Ronnie said, you have other folks we know, we have partnered, Tracy and I partnered with the late State Representative Isaac Robinson. We did some with him last year. Sherry Gay Degnogo. This is I say today is a triple header for me because she did an in-person event and I did a virtual expungement clinic. And and then you and I have been on some panels talking about the new legislation. So I'm really excited to have you here today on the eve of this new legislation. I can tell you, I've done the forums in the past, and a lot of times it's pretty sad because we look at eligibility, people are not eligible. But today I can even testify that there were a lot more people eligible, and this is going to roll out on Sunday. Monday will be the official day when people can, really file everything. So welcome, Representative LaGrand. And why don't you tell the audience, what inspired you to take up the mantle on this expungement, this clean slate legislation?
Sure, and thanks so much for having me. I will say this, when I developed, first of all, it was funny to have you read my biography because I like all those things, right? I'm in favor of government transparency. I'm concerned about the environment, concerned about helping businesses, but where my heart is justice. And my whole career has been about reform in the criminal justice system. And just to lay it out there right at the beginning, I don't think you could talk about the justice system in America honestly without talking about race and class. I think that race issues and class issues run right through the heart of our justice system. And, you know, you could, if you're in a bad mood, you call it our injustice system, because there's so many things that need to be fixed. Now, we have great aspirations, right? We have great visions, like everyone should be equal, but it doesn't roll out very well in a lot of ways. And so when I talk about the justice system, my elevator speech is I say, well, there are things you got to talk about before, during, and after. And there are urgent needs to do reform in all of those things. So the before, obviously, we all know policing is a big issue and how the police interact with citizens, and that's become a national conversation, and that's great. Another big issue before is if you are accused of a crime, if you're poor in America, a lot of times you wind up sitting in jail while you're waiting for anything to happen, and your life falls apart. You lose your job, you lose your housing, maybe your kids go to CPS. I mean, that's a national tragedy. And it's immoral, and it really circles around the issue of cash bond, which 49 out of 50 states use in some form. The feds got rid of it, but it's a national disgrace. The situation with cash bond. That's before, because that's even before you get convicted. During, Michigan has also got a national disgrace. We have the highest length of sentences of any state in the country. We sentence people to almost twice as much as our sentences are basically twice as long as they are elsewhere in the country. So that's a national disgrace. And so how long we keep people matters, because if you lock me up for 2 years, that's a very different thing than locking me up for 5 years, right? 2 years, right. Maybe my wife doesn't divorce me, my kids still recognize me. 5 years, they've moved on maybe, right? Like, so when you're talking about keeping communities together, length of sentence really matters to keeping, because I want to live in a world where we're all able to be forgiven and where we all can get reconciled and welcome back into the community. Because, I mean, again, I'm going to preach a minute here because I'm an ordained minister, but like, I don't want to live in a world without forgiveness, because I need it. I need it every day. And I don't want to live in a world where I get forgiveness when other people don't. And so that's why sentencing length is a really, really crucial issue to talk about. I mean, we don't have to become Norway. If we just became Ohio, we would cut in half the number of people we have incarcerated in Michigan. Right. So that's the during, and then the after. Obviously, the big issue is expungement. But I mean, when I lecture, I sometimes say we don't just have an incarceration crisis in America; we have a stigmatizing crisis. Because when you're out, it's not over. We say people have paid their debt to society, but we don't really mean it, because we still block them from getting housing. We still block them from getting jobs. And when the data shows that's not even good, it's a self-inflicted wound. Because if you welcome those folks back and help them get jobs and welcome back into the community, our community as a whole is safer. So even if you're only self-interested, even if all you're worried about is public safety, we need to be doing reintegration, and that means expungement. Because otherwise, fear is a very, very powerful tool. It's toxic. It runs so much of what we do in our society, right? Everything from our response to terrorism to race, our conversations about race, so much is fueled by fear. And again, I'm going to preach here, but I mean, the heart of life.
It's fine for you to preach. Tracy's an ordained minister. I was raised in the church. I look at this is a ministry here. Expungement, what to do when stopped by the police, education for children. This is a ministry.
Social justice.
So again, this is just me as a Christian. That's my faith tradition. But like, the central message in the gospel again and again is don't be afraid. And if our society runs on fear, we wind up in a very dark place. And if we run on hope and grace and mercy and forgiveness, we wind up in a much better place. And that's what the expungement project is all about. But sometimes Sister Helen Virgin, who wrote the book Dead Man Walking, I was on a panel with her once, and she said, if you got people floating around drowning in a river and you're compassionate, you go fish them out of the river. Then you fish somebody else out of the river, you fish somebody else out of the river. Eventually, if you're compassionate, but you also have a brain, you go upriver and see who's pushing all those people in the river, right? So I'm glad to do expungement, but I'd also like to reduce the number of people we convict for things that we don't really need to stigmatize people for. I'd like to, you know, like I said, the cash bond problem. If you hold somebody in jail for a week or two and they lose their housing and they lose their job, what do you think the odds are? I mean, the odds of them committing a crime go way up, because a lot of crimes are a byproduct of desperation, right? I mean, you could shoplift because you're hungry, right? You could steal Pampers because your baby needs diapers and you don't know what else to do about it, right? So throwing people out of an area where they can function in our society into a place of despair doesn't make us all safer, right? It's crazy. It's just, so we have this self-inflicted wound that's driven by fear, and we just have to break that cycle. So what's exciting about expungement is, and I know you both know this, so but your viewers maybe don't. The data, you know, we did a long study of people who got their records cleaned up, and there's two things worth knowing. One is they're not more dangerous than the general population, so you don't have to be afraid of them. And the second is, if you give them an opportunity, they all of a sudden, their earnings shoot up when they get expungements. When they go up 23%, their income goes up. So if you're concerned about poverty and you're concerned about the widening gap between people in America who make it and people who somehow don't make it, like, this may be the most important anti-poverty thing we do in Michigan in my lifetime so far, because we're going to help something like 1 million people. And if we're helping them with a path out of poverty, that is some powerful hope. Now, we have to do more, right? I don't think it's enough. There's, you know, this is a big topic. And so that's why my focus in Lansing has really only been on justice things. I do other things on the side, maybe sometimes, but when I wake up in the morning, I think, how can we improve our justice system? Because there's so much work to do. And this is one piece of the puzzle. And, you know, you alluded to the fact that I'm helping the folks in Connecticut work on this. I'm in some initial conversations with folks in Tennessee about doing expungement, cleaning up records, because, and you both know this, but your readers, your listeners maybe don't, all of our media, we focus on the federal government, right? Like the last 4 years, we've been focusing on every time President Trump ate a Big Mac, it made national news, right? Well, if you're worried about justice, all the actions at the state level, we could close the federal prison system down tomorrow, and it wouldn't solve mass incarceration, right? The policing decisions that happen in our communities every day get people put in our jails and our prisons, our state jails and state prisons. I mean, there are people in the federal system, but they're 5% of the total population. So if you care about justice and you want to build a better society, the action is at the state level. So I am a state rep because that's where the action is.
You know, Rep. LaGrand, I've got a question though. I find an interesting duality happening in Michigan, where now, because of Michigan's rollout of the Clean Slate law tomorrow, which you were a chief architect of, we have this issue with cash bail. Why is that? Why is there this duality when, as I understand it, we are in the era of bipartisanship in tackling criminal justice reform in Lansing and across the country?
Yeah, well, let me suggest this to your listeners. The Detroit Free Press did a great editorial about this a couple weeks ago, and the thing about expungement is there's nobody on the other side pushing back, really. So it was an opportunity to like take the ball and run it into the end zone, because once you show the data, everyone's like, yeah, that's great, and no one's to lose money. The problem with fixing the case money is we fix the bail bonds industry. And so the bail bond industry is not all that excited about fixing the cash bond system. Now, there's a longer conversation there, because I want to, the thing that concerns me most is low dollar bonds, because low dollar bonds keep poor people who aren't dangerous incarcerated, right? No judge in Michigan is setting a $500 bond because they think $500 is going to keep the community safe. They set $500 bonds because they're making 150 grand a year. So in their world, $500 is no big thing. Right? It's hard for, if you're living in a system where everyone's middle class, right? Like the three of us on this conversation, we're all middle class. We could come up with $500. And And the thing about doing the work that we do, or I used to do, is at least you see the people every day who can't afford it. But imagine
Right.
you work in a big firm, right? Those lawyers don't see people who don't have $500. So it's
Right.
hard to believe. Sometimes statistics are hard to believe, and it's hard to know what to do with them, right? So, this is certainly true of sexual assaults on campus. And this is another topic, but it's an important example. We know that lots of women are being assaulted on college campuses. We know something
Right.
like at least 20%, maybe 30% of women are getting assaulted. Well, how many criminal charges are coming off the U of M campus every year? We're not getting a couple thousand criminal charges every year because the numbers are so big. I think it causes paralysis. Like,
Right.
we don't even know what to do with that. And so we kind of ignore it, right? It's this blind spot because the problem's so horrifying. Well, I mean, the same thing's true of our prison system, right? 30% of our prisoners have Hep C or HIV. They don't go in with Hep C or HIV. Bad things happen to people in prison, but we don't want to talk about it because it's so horrible. We don't know what to do about it, right? Prison rape is something we don't want to talk about because it's so awful and we don't
Right.
know what to do. I mean, judges don't want to sit there and say, I sentence you to 2 to 5 years of being raped. I mean, if they had to say that, I don't think they could get out of bed and sentence people, right? So
Wow.
sometimes problems are so bad, you can't really face them. Well, I
Okay.
mean, the same thing is, right? So the same thing is true, I think, for, I mean, there are parts of our justice system that are so broken, it's hard for us to talk about them intelligibly. Well, the fact that 54% of our country doesn't have $500 to fix a $500 problem, that is a basic problem. I don't want to live in a society where there's that much of a gap between the middle class and half of our country, right? That starts to look like economic injustice to me.
Right. Right.
Right.
That
And
reality,
Tracy and I see that. Tracy working in the neglect court and delinquency. I work in the neglect court and seeing it in delinquency. What I see on a regular basis in the criminal court, with judges setting those bonds, that $500 bond, and trying to explain to the judge, you have judges, middle class, upper middle class, they're not having, Tracy and I have talked about this, judges that are getting on the clients about the way that they dress on Zoom, about their
and so they
dress.
got a time machine. They're like, you have an iPhone. Well, yeah, when I bought the iPhone, I didn't even know I could even money for money, judge. Like, these judges look like they got a time machine. They can go back in people's histories and ask them to reverse decisions. Like, you got a nice haircut. You should be able to afford bond. It's like, no, maybe if you had told me 2 weeks ago that you were going to ask for this money, I wouldn't have got the haircut. But that's a time machine
Right.
analysis. That's not fair,
Right.
right? Nobody's doing a time
Right.
machine analysis on my decisions.
Well,
Yeah.
Representative LaGrand, I know that you have been fighting 5 years to get this legislation passed to reform cash bail. And I understand that bail reform was finally on the state legislature's lame duck agenda, but then something happened to knock it off. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, Rudy Giuliani happened. I mean,
Wow.
it's sad. And look, you're a Detroit podcast, right? Rudy Giuliani is a walking, talking lunatic. He came into an oversight committee and he told us that there were 700,000 fraudulent votes cast in the city of Detroit. I'm like, you do know that there's only like 600,000 people in Detroit. So unless you think there's like fairies and gnomes and elves living in people's basements who came out on election day and voted, you got a problem saying there were 700,000 votes out of a city with 600,000 people. Moreover, there's only 500,000 registered voters. Moreover, there were only 250,000 votes that got counted. So where you got 700,000 from? Like, how do you even start with a man who's that crazy, right? Well,
Right.
not only was he that crazy, but he's crazy enough. He showed up without a mask. He was urging his witnesses to take off their masks. Then it turned out he had COVID. So Rudy, the super spreader, created the super spreader event, which shut down the legislature, which shut down our ability to cash bond last session, which was really a shame. So I'm working.
That's what happened.
Yeah,
Okay, I thought it was just because he got on the agenda before the bail reform. I didn't realize that because he turned into a super spreader event too.
Yeah,
Okay.
we shut down for a week, and that was the critical week. And because there's any rules, that basically means it's impossible to do anything faster than 2 weeks. So we had it all set up to do in the last 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden we had to be shut for a week, and that was the end of it.
Where are we now with it?
Well, where we are now is we are really trying to we're trying to get as much justice as we can here. And so this is another conversation. Like, if we wanted to have a conversation about expungement, I can tell you places where I would like to have gone further, because I spent 2 years negotiating. You know, people would say, "Oh, I want to wait 10 years before we do automatic," and I'm like, how about we say 10 years after they get out and not after their probation or parole? So I won that fight.
Right.
But me personally, I'd like automatic to happen after 5 years, not 10.
Right.
10. 10 is way too long a wait. So conversations are saying, so look, I'm 54. Tell me if I steal tomorrow, I gotta wait 10 years, then I'm retired. Like, I don't need this. We are, because that's what happened. I dropped out a minute there, so we froze. But so you know, we can go into the compromises that had to get made to even get expungement over the finish line. There are gonna maybe be compromises in the cash fund process too, to get it over the finish line. So we're having those conversations. So I'll give you one example, and I'm not telling you a trade secret. These are all sessions that are happening. But one question is, for example, if somebody obviously exhibits signs of mental illness, we don't want that person stuck in a jail. We want them moved to a mental health treatment facility, right?
Okay.
So and so the question is, how long is a reasonable amount of time before you require a local jail unit to do that? Like, how fast should the Wayne County Jail have to take action if they know someone has mental health? Like 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours. There's got to be a number, right? But we're negotiating that number with the sheriffs.
Okay.
Right. And so and then another question is, like, you know, things will come up like
David, you're freezing up. You're freezing up a little bit. But what I wanted, when you talk about the mental health issue, I personally have clients right now that have been held up in the jails, and they're in limbo because they don't have family that can take them or is willing to take them, and they're being held up in the jails right now. And the judges are like, well, they're a threat to society. We're going to I have a guy with a $500 cash bail. Family won't bring him out. He's getting some services in the jail, but he should not be in the jail. He should be in a mental health facility.
Exactly. And so that's one of those topics we're wrestling with, right? And you know, it's a big thorny issue, but believe me, I'm going after that. And I mean, look, we can have a whole other podcast about the mental health system and it's how it's entangled with the justice system, right? For example, we don't make any concessions in our sentencing guidelines for mental health issues. Well, you know, if I'm bipolar and I'm decompensating and, you know, I go break up somebody's front door, why should that person be held to the same standard as somebody who doesn't have any mental health issues and just did it because they're a mean person, right? Like, we don't do a good job of acknowledging mental health. We don't do a good job of acknowledging cognitive problems like fetal alcohol syndrome. Like, we know that affects people's judgment centers, right? But I mean, you both know, you look at the sentencing guidelines for some recognition of cognitive issues. There's nothing in the sentencing guidelines that acknowledge that right now. Now, I'm getting onto my next crusade here, right? Like, I got 15 bills that I've got pending that I crafted, but then I gave them to some of my colleagues, kind of like we did with expungement. You come up with the agenda and then you give pieces of it to various people. That's how you get things done, because then 15 people can say, this is my bill, right? So I've got 15 bills that I wrote, and I'm giving them out. And some of them are acknowledgement of mental health issues. One is acknowledging of treatment, because, you know, and again, your readers may not have thought about this, or your listeners, sorry, but, you know, let's say person Bob Smith gets pulled over for a drunk driving. Well, he doesn't get sentenced that afternoon. He gets sentenced 2-3 months down the road.
Right.
So he's got 2 or 3 months from the time it happened to assess his life and do something, right? So if Bob Smith goes and does 90 meetings in 90 days, goes to therapy, tries to understand the depression that led him to alcohol, that's a very different drunk driver than the guy who goes home and keeps drinking malt liquor on his front porch for the next 90 days and says, I like drinking and driving. But there's no difference in the guidelines between the person who engages and tries to solve their problem, and the person who doesn't even want to solve their problem. Well, why would we not want to recognize people doing the good work? Like we lawyers, first thing we do when we get a drunk driver is try to get them to take those steps, right? We say,
Right.
look, you got to go to AA. Like, where did this come from? Like, are you grieving? Are you depressed? Like, you know, do you have PTSD? Like, we're always digging into those causes so we can help people fix those problems. But the justice system, like, you know, we look, there's great signs of hope in our treatment programs, right? Our specialty courts, because our
Right.
specialty courts do ask those kinds of questions. If you get into sobriety court, they're asking all the right questions because they're trying to help you succeed, not help you fail. Unfortunately, we've got a failure-based system with a few exceptions, right? The traditional officer or probation officer is waiting to see if you fail, right? And when you fail,
Yes,
he's like,
it
yep, I
seems
knew
like
LaGrand was
that.
going to fail. Right, I knew LaGrand was going to fail, right? They're almost happy when you fail, a traditional
Right.
probation officer. Now, a problem-solving probation officer is going to be happy when you don't fail. And so we need to flip the script on the way our whole system works. Now, the juvenile system often works differently because in our society, we still believe children can change. But we
Right.
don't believe adults. We don't believe adults can change, which is a problem because I need to get better. I need to be a better person tomorrow.
Right. Everybody
Like,
can
again,
change.
right.
I
Like we
agree.
all, right? Like we all, I want to believe that everybody has the capacity to improve, and it doesn't stop when you turn 17.
Right. And why can't we be like Norway? I mean, why can't the American justice system ascribe to be more like Norway? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, especially in the climate that we're living in now with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. But I want to get back to the cash bail because I want to ask you about your colleague, Rep. Matt Murdock. I know he's a big time bail bondsman. He owns all these bond agencies in, was it 28 counties, which is about a third of the bail bonds, about a third of the counties rather. What are the chances of this cash bail reform happening now with Matt Murdock out here leading the charge against it and the prosecutors? You used to be a prosecutor. So what are the chances now in this climate?
So here's the answer. You know, getting the prosecutors supportive of this will be a very important part of the process. And so we are talking with them. And, you know, I think sometimes, look, here's confession time. I worked in the justice system as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor for more than 20 years, almost 25 years.
Okay.
Before I realized it was just one day. I looked at you know, you grow up and you go to law school and it's what we do, right?
Right.
And so you learn how to work in the system and you learn how to like help your clients get bond maybe, and you put up with it. But really for me, I had this sort of conversion experience, you know, about 5-6 years ago when I thought, wait a minute, why do we do this?
Right.
What is this good for? Like, how is this helping anybody?
Right.
And I suddenly realized, like, it doesn't have to be this way. Just because everybody in the country does it, and just because we've been doing it for hundreds of years, get right. But something they grew up with, trained with. That doesn't mean they want to be unjust. And so I think bringing prosecutors along in this conversation is really important. Now, Matt Maddock, he's one man. And I don't think anything is going to, I mean, look, I hope the scales fall from Matt's eyes because, you know, there's still a place for him to make money on people who need $100,000 bonds. What I don't understand about his opposition thus far is the focus of cash bond, where most of the problem is in low dollar bonds for low risk people. Those are the people we're clogging up the system with. I don't
And
think
he's not
anybody
making money off of that. He's not making money off of it.
He makes money on a 10% basis, right? So on a
Right.
$500 bond, he's not even going to open that file, right? I mean, it's a little bit like, you know, a lawyer's not going to open a file for $50. I don't think that a bondsman would. So I don't exactly understand it, except fear of change, right? He knows how to make money now. Like, I guess I get that, right? Like a lot of people, like if I came to you and said, the rules of being a lawyer, I'm going to completely change those. Your first reaction would be, whoa, wait a minute. I know how to be a lawyer now. Like maybe this new thing you're giving me is going to be better for me, but I'm going to need to take a long, hard look, because if I'm wrong and all of a sudden I'm unemployed and I'm working at Walmart as a greeter because you changed the rules on how to be a lawyer, like I wouldn't want that, right? And when you start changing things on doctors, they get very scared because they know how the system worked last week, and they know they had a job last week, right? So again, coming back to that fear theme, like I have a little sympathy for the bail bonds people in the sense that they're scared of change, and I can understand that because we're all scared of change, right? Until we get used to it, we think about it a little bit. I mean, again, bringing this back to the current policing thing, right? Imagine if you're brought up thinking every cop I come up to probably has somebody in it who's going to shoot me, so I got to bring my gun out really fast.
Right.
Well, if we can build a society and explain it, we're going to have a cultural shift in policing where we explain to them and where they understand, well, maybe bringing my gun out is part of the problem, right? Maybe that's part of what gets the shooting to start,
Right.
is that I'm so quick to whip my gun out every time there's a traffic stop. But that's a cultural change. It doesn't happen easily because people are comfortable with what they know, right?
Yeah,
And
we're
they know
actually going to
what they
be,
do.
we're going to be interviewing Sheriff Jerry Clayton out of Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department, who I reached out to him in November of 2014. And we started doing programs on what to do when stopped by the police. He developed cards, informational cards, and he does trainings for attorneys because we are in this climate with the Derek Chauvin trial, with the death or the murder, the lynching of George Floyd. So, and I do see it's all connected. Like I was recruited, as you know, by Judge Thomas to do expungement. But as I started to do it, it informed me in the way I practiced criminal law. But it also, I said, oh, okay, we got to do what to do when stopped by the police. We got to do precursor because we want to stop people from getting in the system. We want them to know the rules so they can avoid as best as possible. We know race and class, there's a factors, avoid them getting sucked into the prison industrial complex or the school to prison pipeline. So yeah, so kudos to you. I'm sorry, I'll let you finish what you were saying, but I have some more questions. I got some questions too in terms of some things, but go ahead.
Look, look, all of us can talk about this forever, so you can tell me to be quiet anytime you want.
You got to come back.
Yeah, this is the beginning of the dialogue because there's so many issues that you're talking about, and I mean you're preaching to the choir here. So I'll say this. The next question I have, Tracy and I have talked about this. Again, I'm doing the indigent defense in Detroit. And what I am seeing is not just Detroit, but across the state, but Detroit is a very depressed environment. We're seeing people that are getting stopped for having guns. And I've had a number of clients that they go to the store, they're nervous with the pandemic. They buy a legal gun and then they think it's open carry. And then they get stopped and they get charged with a 5-year felony for carrying a concealed weapon. I did reach out to the prosecutor's office. They have us doing diversion programs, but it's my understanding is that they have 700 letters that we put out there to get, and only 34 people who have been accepted to the special diversion program, where if they do the program for a year, they won't have a record. So that's my question to you is, are there any efforts right now for people who are lawful? We're not talking about illegal guns. We know the president has some things out there for the illegal guns and the AR-15s and all that. Are there any steps to deal with people that get a legal gun? And I mean, because they're being penalized with a 5-year felony for ignorance of the law. They think it's open carry when it's not, it's not open carry everywhere.
Yeah, that's a tricky one for me because, I did for a long time practice, and essentially I feel like the same practice you did, right? Like I did court-appointed cases, and I dealt with a lot of folks who are in this situation, and a lot of young men in our culture are getting the wrong memo, right? That they got to carry a gun, and what I always say is a couple things. First of all, to these, and it's usually young men I had to have this conversation with, I'd say, look, 3 things. Number 1, carrying a gun does not make you a man. Number 2, if you want protection, buy a vest, because that gun is not going to stop any bullets. Number 3, if you're carrying a gun, you're giving advance permission to somebody to shoot you dead, because they're like, I had to shoot him, he had a gun. Like, I think gun play and gun use goes wrong so often. that I think it's time we message. I would love to see a public service message that said something like, buy a vest, not a gun. Because I understand, like, we've got real rises in crime in our urban communities, right? It's real.
But look, Ron, are vests legal if you're not in law enforcement?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I got one. I wear it to work.
Okay,
Well, I mean,
you're a representative though, but if you're just an average
No,
Joe,
people keep threatening my life all the time. I got a vest, believe me.
And Representative LaGrand, I will say this, for me, I know that Tracy has talked about this. She's a lawful gun owner. She lives in Detroit. I live in Van Buren, Belleville, and I'm from Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti. And again, if I lived in Detroit in a rough neighborhood, I can understand where, you know, we can talk to people about how, I mean, I know guns are not for everybody. If you're a hothead and you have a temper, you shouldn't have a gun. But for me, I'm like, I have people that are telling me they're scared. They live in a rough neighborhood where the police doesn't come, so they don't show up. So some people, they want, you know, there's a right to the Second Amendment. There are some people that feel that they need to have a gun. So, and then there's a lawsuit pending in the county of Wayne, because it was slow even before the pandemic, where the office for carrying a permit, it would be very slow for you to be able to get that. But now there's a holdup with the pandemic. But it's my understanding there's no holdup in the rest of the state. So there's a concern that Black people are basically being told, the message is, you have a Second Amendment right to carry a gun, but not if you're Black, not if you live in Wayne County. And I mean, and there's a disparity. Of course, I'm not saying, I mean, I have represented people that have gone to prison for murder. So I'm not saying everybody needs a gun. I don't have a gun. But again, I'm coming from Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor. I don't live in a rough neighborhood.
but Robin, it doesn't matter if you live in Detroit or Grosse Pointe or Grand Rapids. I believe in the Second Amendment. Regardless of where I lived, I would own firearms. I've been through the police academy. I'm law enforcement trained. It's my belief that, you know, I have a right to protect myself and my family. But let's toss it back to Representative LaGrand on what his take is on all of this.
Well, I'll tell you, so I guess I think one of the things that's important in our current day and age of political culture is to be able to disagree with our friends without getting too bad. So I will push back on the gun thing, which is to say, yes, people have a right to have a gun, but here's what fills my heart with worry. I mean, I really do think that if someone sees you have a gun, the odds of them shooting you go way, way up. And then the other thing is just the accidental firearm problem. Like, kids get a hold of these things. I mean, when I was a prosecutor, I will tell you, I used to own a gun. When I was a prosecutor, I didn't know how often I was going to get shot by, you know, like what my risk factors were for being a prosecutor. And I lived 4 blocks from the courthouse in a neighborhood that wasn't all that great. And I thought, you know, all I need is one defendant who's mad and follows me home and can find out where I live. So I bought a gun. Problem is, I had a 2-year-old son, and after a little while, I realized that boy's job is to find things. And if I put that gun up on the roof in a locked box and I buried the ammunition in the backyard, it might take him some time, but eventually that kid was going to find that ammunition, find that gun, put them together, and shoot himself. So I got rid of the gun.
But that's what gun locks are for, and gun lockers for responsible gun owners.
Sure, but he could find the key to the lock too. I mean, I'm just saying, statistically, so many people. And the other thing is, I've seen so many people. I've seen 2 things that make me sad. One is the young man who gets convicted of murder, right? Like he's got a drug deal. He pulls out the gun, something goes wrong, and he says, the gun went off in my hands. Now we know that's not what actually happens, but how he felt like it happened, right? Like all of a sudden he's sitting there and there's a body. Like it makes it so, it can happen so quickly. Things can go wrong so quickly with guns out there. And the other part of this is
27 years. I had a client that was one of my first murder trials. He was 21, 27 years. He's not getting out till he's 48.
Right, and I feel for those people. Like, I mean, you know, again, if you want to stab somebody to death, you got to work at it. Like, that's not a casual thing, right? I've never seen a stabbing death that didn't have more than 20 stabs. Like, yeah, I know you can theoretically do it once, but like, it's a messy thing to stab somebody to death. guns can go off so easily. And the other part of this is like I've had domestics where, you know, the man gets mad at his wife and they've been married for 30 years and they're, you know, they're good people, but he's had a couple drinks and they have a gun in the bedside table because for protection, for home protection. And all of a sudden the gun's in his hand. And then I think, man, but for the grace of God, you could have like shot your wife.
Right.
And, you know, it would have ruined your life. And I'm thinking, why was that gun in the bedroom? Like, because I get angry more often than I get my house broken into. Like, way more often. I get angry too much, right? I mean, I had my house broken into once by a young man who was carrying a gun. Well,
Right.
I didn't have a gun, and probably good because I let him run, right? Like, if I had a gun, I thought I had to do something about it. Maybe I'd be dead now. Like, he had a gun, I didn't, and so I was scared and I let him run away.
Right.
Probably letting him run away was a smart move there. But whatever.
Right.
I mean, look, we can agree to disagree on this. That's my perspective. I worry about all those things when I think about guns in the community. So I have a hard time saying, let's just roll over on more guns in the community, because I think gun saturation is just a big problem.
Well, I think illegal guns, they should do buybacks for illegal guns. But again, I look at, I'm not somebody in a rough neighborhood. If I'm in a rough neighborhood, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of some of my clients. So we have that point. And then I have another question based on
90% of illegal guns started out legal, right? And like Tola Fave, one of my colleagues, he had legally owned guns in his dresser drawer in Lansing. They get stolen. Well, now they're out doing bad things in the community. I mean, the more guns you have out there, the more opportunities you have for theft. And the more you have people,
I take it that you support President Biden's executive action on gun control regarding these ghost guns and universal background checks and what have you.
Yeah, of course. And, I think that, again, there are lots of pieces to this. And look, I had a gun pulled on me 2 years ago by a guy who was carrying it on the central console of his truck. Like, I've probably had more gun-related incidents in my life that I really, that has helped me. It was a guy who thought I had got a parking spot before he got it, and he was angry. And I'm like, dude, chill. Like, there's another parking spot right over there. And I'm going up to try to de-escalate his anger, right? I'm just trying to I'm like, look, I'll even move my car if you want. But I did the parking spot, I did pull in first. And that's how this works. And I wasn't even cutting you off. You were behind me. And he was mad. And all of a sudden he's got a gun in his hand. And I'm thinking, and then he yells, what did he say? He said, I feel threatened. I'm like, oh, damn, this guy's trying to build himself a stand your ground defense. Yeah. So I walked out in the middle of the road so that at least there'd be witnesses if I wind up with a hole in my chest. Things can escalate so quickly. I'm a little irrationally angry because I didn't have some caffeine that morning.
Right.
How it ended, if you want to know, how it ended was, I did not go into my office, which is in this. I actually parked in front of my office. I didn't go into my office because I didn't want that guy knowing where I was going. I stood up on the street and I called the cops, and he saw me do it. And he went into a party store across the street and ditched the gun. And the response time for the cops was 12 minutes. So by the time I gave him plenty of time to get into the store, hand the gun off to a buddy, get out of the store. So the cops pulled him over, but by that point he didn't have the gun. And by that point, the gun was not retrievable. So, So, I mean, there are layers to that story, right? One is response time matters. And if you want fast response time, you can't be cutting your police force down to nothing. Because the difference between a 5-minute response and a 12-minute response is the difference between that guy being able to ditch his gun and not ditch his gun after he pulls it on me in broad daylight. So, there are all those conversations we have to have. But the guy did have access to a gun, and I don't think he woke up that morning trying to kill anybody. And I'm sure he'd say, I have this gun in my truck for protection. And it was open carry. It was sitting right there in his console.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, here I am looking at a 9mm because I was trying to be nice to the guy. That's a problem.
Well, we're glad that you came out safe.
Yeah, there's so many ways to look at this issue. You know, when I was 4 years old, our family, there was a white man that pulled a gun on us, and my parents, I found this out from another relative. They said I was shivering for days. They said that my father had the person prosecuted. But there's so many different ways of looking at this gun issue. You know, I support Biden's efforts. And I definitely think the House and the Senate should take up this issue. But again, I feel too that if a person wants to lawful, if they can be a responsible adult, you know, there's just so many ways of looking at this. So we could definitely talk about it for days. But also,
Yeah, I think it is a whole nother show, a whole nother
right, it
podcast.
sounds like it's gonna be a whole nother show. But Representative LaGrand, you are term limited. You know, this is like, I look at this as like track. Like you have the baton. You know, I interviewed Representative Mary Waters, who also had introduced some expungement legislation, and then it's like you're carrying on the baton. My question to you, and I know the audience is going to want to know, you have an exciting background. You've done so much. What's next for you? Are you going to run for state senate? Are you going to run for prosecutor? Are you going to be a judge? Like, because you're talking about criminal justice reform on the state level. Like, what's next for you? Like, do you have that idea? Will you let us know? We want to be on the inside track. I know Tracy, I can hear her.
Breaking news.
Tracy's a lawyer and an investigative reporter. So we want to know, do you have an idea? What's next?
You know, those would all be good. And again, this comes back for me to my faith background, which is, and I was saying this to my father-in-law just the other day, I think for me, one of the most important passages in the New Testament is the parable of the sheep and the goats, because that focuses on like, where are your skills? Like if God's given you the ability to do things, you need to go do them. So for me, the question is going to be, where can I do the most good? And how can I help the most people? That really is going to drive my next decisions. And it's not clear to me. I mean, I'm thinking about all of those three things you talked about. But yeah, the thing that makes me sad is there are 0 lawyers in the Michigan Senate right now. And there's only 2 0.
Okay.
And like there aren't a lot of people who ever are there like me who have done criminal justice their entire careers, right?
Okay.
So there just aren't a lot of people with the expertise and the persistence to keep this stuff going. Now, you know, I'm hoping, like there is, oddly enough, there's a dairy farmer from West Michigan. His name is Luke Meerman. He's a Republican, but Luke is on fire on criminal justice reform. So,
okay.
And Luke's got one more term. So like, and you know, I'm hoping, like the first thing Luke ever said to me when he showed up was basically, hey, David, all of this stuff you're working on, I want to keep working on it when you're out of here. And I'm like, I'm not dead yet, man. Why don't you let me keep working on it? But like, he knew he was going to be there longer than me. And term limits, for me, it kills me, right? If I understand Lansing, because this is so important, right? I mean, nothing is more fundamental than liberty, and nothing is more important to people who are on the edges of society than that question of, is the government going to lock you up? I mean, that is such an intrusive thing to do to people, and we're not as careful about it as we should be, and we don't apply it uniformly across race and class lines, and there's so many things we need to do better. You know, we just need to keep championing on these issues, and I just feel blessed. I mean, maybe you all both need to run.
Well, we'll see. Yes. Well, I mean, I like you. I look at where can I achieve my highest good? Where does God want me to be? So if God says this is where I want you to go, then I'll go in that direction.
It's a calling.
Let me turn around. I mean, if either one of you were in the state house, I would be happier. I'd be happier if I was leaving knowing you were coming in, because you know, these issues are they take years. I mean, even raising the age, right? We were a national disgrace charging 17-year-olds as adults. It took us 6 years to fix that, and there was no pushback on the other side, really, right? I mean, there wasn't anybody saying, yeah, I really think 17-year-olds are grown-ups. Like, nobody thought that. We were still the last state in the country to do it, and you know, it took us 6 years. I'm
so glad that Michigan passed, Clean Slate for Kids. Governor Whitmer, signed off on that in January. But this conversation would not be complete without your comment on the myths and facts connected to cash bail. I do want to ask you, this issue came up in this op-ed that ran in the Free Press that you mentioned earlier, Rep. LaGrand, where there's this notion that if people don't have skin in the game, if they don't have money on the line, that they won't return to court for their hearings, for their cases. What's your take on that?
Well, that turns out to be a myth. All the studies show that that doesn't make sense. And also, this gets back to our that question we talked about, the success-based versus failure-based.
Right.
Okay.
If what the system is telling me is, gee, I want people to show up more reliably, there are lots of ways to do that that have nothing to do with bond at all. Right? My dentist sends me a text reminder. My staffer reminded me about this conversation 10 minutes beforehand. He called me. He's like, "Hey, you're going to be on the show in 10 minutes, right?" Well, like that helped me remember.
Right.
If we really want people to show up, how hard would it be for the court to call people the day before court and say, "Hey, remember your prelims tomorrow," right? Like the court could do that if the court wanted to help those people succeed. Because some people, I mean, look, we know some of the people we represent aren't like the most go-getter types, right? And
Right.
so sometimes they'll like sleep through their court appearance, and you're like, "Dude, what were you doing?" Right? Or I mean, I've had that experience. You know, you got a prelim in 10 minutes, and you're looking around the court wondering where your client is, and you call him up. He's like, "Oh, was that today?" And you're like, "I'm not your mom." But if the court could be your mom, the court could call you up and remind you. The court could send text messages, and all of those things have massive increases in getting people to show up. So if we weren't all focused on this personal responsibility, like, you know, we're gonna watch you, wait for you to fail, trip up, and when you do, then we're gonna blame you and smash you. I mean, that's what our justice system is basically, right? It's a failure-based system. So if you really want people to show up, figure out how to help them show up. Offer them rides. Like, we got Uber now. Send out Ubers, right?
Who's going to pay for it, though? That's the question.
Well, no, I hear you. She said, "Who's going to pay for it?" But yeah, I did become aware of a judge in Louisiana who has a system set up where they will text, call, and they will do a reminder for the defendants. And I'm like, we need to have a model like that nationwide.
We have it in Third Circuit in Wayne County, but you have to sign up for that. A lot of the people, the defendants, respondents, plaintiffs, defendants, they don't even know about it. Okay, their lawyers don't tell them about it. It's on the court website, but how many people actually look at that?
Right.
Well, right now, Wayne County is just a hot mess because I have clients where we're supposed to have an arraignment on a certain date, but then the judges aren't there. So it's in limbo. So I have people that they've put a bench warrant out for their arrest. And here I am emailing the clerks, and I have to go back, and it's just it's a mess in Wayne County right now.
Yeah, no, I know. So the example is, right, texts are cheap. So we can start with the low hanging fruit. But I'm saying, like, down the line, like, if somebody doesn't show up, that's about $100 worth of nuisance. So, if we offered somebody a $10 Uber ride and it saved us $100 worth of wasted time, it would be a good idea.
Right.
But again, we have this system that my other joke I sometimes use, and it's my dark sense of humor on this. I say two things about our justice system. We build it for sociopaths and we apply it to everybody. Right? Like, most defendants know what they did is wrong. They're sorry, and they'd fix it if they could.
Right.
And we act like they're all sociopaths. They're not. They have consciences. They just screwed up. But the other thing is, we build this system, and it works pretty well for the middle class. Right? If you've got a reliable car, then getting to court's not a problem. If you've got, a spouse who's going to kick you out of bed in the morning and make sure you make your court date, okay, then if you've got support systems around you, which a lot of middle class people do, great. But if you don't have those support systems and you're a single mom trying to make sure your kids get out the door to school and you're working 2 jobs and you're just so tired and, you didn't have a good place to write that down and you don't know how to use the calendar function in your phone and whatever. Right? You may not want to miss. Nobody wants to miss a misdemeanor court date. Like, we know that. Nobody's going to Venezuela to beat their misdemeanor, right? But our system is clogged with people who don't show up for misdemeanors. Well, who are we kidding? Why are we wasting all this time on waiting for people to fail and then acting all surprised and outraged when they fail.
Right.
Again, it's a failure-based system. Instead of asking, no business operates this way. You know, if you can't buy donuts from your bakery, they don't sit around and say, oh, well, you should learn how to buy the donuts better. They think, oh, somehow you are not able to buy our donuts. We want you to buy our donuts, so let's figure out how to solve that problem.
Right.
So,
Right.
I
I don't know how the buses run in Grand Rapids, but in Detroit, I'm sorry to say, they're not too reliable, especially during the pandemic. And so, many times my clients will miss the bus and they're late for a court hearing. Now, thank goodness we're on Zoom court now, and that has created more access to justice, I believe, having hearings on Zoom. But I do want to ask you about this, Representative LaGrand. Now, in Washtenaw County, Prosecutor Ellie Savitt has done away with cash bond altogether. I know in Oakland County, the new prosecutor, Karen McDonald, is contemplating it. In Wayne County, Kim Worthy says she's, for bail reform. We'll see what happens with that. But what do you think about this trend? Is that something, beyond legislation? And thank you for everything that you're doing with the legislation. But do you think in this climate, prosecutors are going to jump on this and do away with cash bond altogether?
Well, first of all, a couple things there. Let's be technical here, because he can't technically get rid of cash bond because it's set by the judge. It's not set by the prosecutor, right? He said, he made a great headline, but what he means is we're going to stop asking for it. And that's great. And it's a move in the right direction, and hallelujah. But the other thing is, he said he's going to stop using cash. He still is going to use sureties. So, you're still back to sort of needing to come up with some wealth in situations. Now, that's all he can do. That's the only card he's got to play. And I applaud him for playing it, and it's great. But we shouldn't oversell it because it's not a fix. The fix should happen legislatively. Right. So that's so a little bit like in the Detroit area, there's this great group. I think they're called the Bail Bond Project, and they go and they try to bail people out.
The Bail Bond Project.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's great, but you can only help it. But like first time I talked to them after a year, they'd helped like 50 people. I'm like, well, that's great, but we got like 18,000 people at our jails, and 70% of them are there pre-trial. So like, I'm glad you're doing something in response to the injustice, but it's that dead man walking thing. Like, sure, you can fish people out of the river, but at some point you got to go upstream and see who's pushing them in the river. Right. So we just got to push them in the river. And that's the legislature's job, right? He's awesome. He's my friend there. But like Prosecutor Savitt is doing what I think he's doing justice, but he's doing justice in the face of an unjust architecture. And so really we got to change the architecture.
I agree. I'm curious, do you think that this pandemic has given a nudge to things like bail reform and other criminal justice reform issues?
Well, I hope so, because in a sense, it's sort of exposed this monster under the bed problem, right? Like a lot of people get furloughed out of jail, and like, the city's not on fire, right? Like we didn't have an epidemic of these people getting released and like going out and robbing banks. So like if you get rid of an entire like pretrial detention mechanism and nothing terrible happens, you kind of ran an interesting experiment. Then you could say like, maybe we didn't need to be keeping all these people locked up. Because the funny thing is, it shows the system. Like those of us who study this already knew this. If you keep somebody locked up, on average, if you keep somebody locked up pre-trial, on average, they wind up receiving twice as long a sentence from the judge, and they're way more likely to plead guilty to something they didn't do because they just want to go home, right? So if you offer them credit time served, they'll say, tell me what I did so I can tell the judge. They don't care about guilt or innocence anymore if they're able to go home, take care of their babies, maybe keep their job, maybe keep their housing. So the problem with these low dollar bonds is it causes injustice, and it also causes people, and of course people reoffend at a greater rate if they don't get out because they lost their job, they lost their housing. They're in a worse place to obey the laws than if they hadn't been kept in jail for those 4 or 5 days and had their lives fall apart. So the key is to not cause people's, we cause people's lives to fall apart and then we blame them. That's just not rational. But so the data's always been there. But now maybe there's enough broad, we did the test so that the man on the street or the woman on the street can believe it. right?
Right.
So it's hopeful as a messaging thing. Like those of us who study this already knew this. We knew that you keeping somebody in jail pre-trial on a low dollar bond only makes their lives worse and only drives community safety down. It doesn't drive community safety up.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, I mean, that is just pure evilness. I mean, to, lock somebody up in detention during a pandemic and they catch COVID.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, last April, I spent about 100 hours desperately trying to craft an emergency order that would allow furloughed relief for people from prisons and jails. And it is a deep regret of mine that, the executive office never took it up and took action.
Wow.
I really wish that we had been able to furlough some of those folks. And we could have been like, if their mom was like, "Hey, I'll take him. I'll take him. I'll put him on my basement. I promise he'll come back after COVID. After the pandemic's over, whatever." Like there was a moment there we could have saved a lot of lives and we could have stopped a lot of people getting COVID.
Well, I would say this, kudos to the Wayne County Criminal Defense Bar, because there was a movement and we did file motions for compassionate release. We were able to release some of the folks in Wayne County. Kudos to the late Sheriff Benny Napoleon, the prosecutor Kim Worthy, and Judge Tim Kinney. So there were efforts there. I was able to get a client who had some severe mental issues. I convinced his family to let him out. He's out there. But I still have people that are in the jail right now. We're going into what this is called the fourth wave, and they are still at risk. And so there is still work that is yet to be done for people that mental health issues, drug issues, and they're at risk of dying. We talk about failure, and it's like the penalty-based system. It should not be a death sentence. We don't have capital punishment. In terms of the death penalty, but we in writing, but in practice with COVID, this is like a death sentence for people that are in our jails and our prisons. This is like a death sentence.
Yep. No, it's terrible. So again, thank you for the work you're doing on the ground, but it's the wholesale versus retail problem, right? So like if you're working retail against a system that should have done this systematically, that's where I was trying to do work. I was trying to have this be a statewide policy that really would have rolled out uniformly. And and also the work you did, I'm guessing most of it was in the jails, whereas the prisons are a whole other issue, right? You got 30,000.
Yeah, it was in the courts, in the district courts and the circuit courts. Yeah.
Right. Well, I know Representative LaGrand, you've got to run soon, but I was curious, a couple of things. Did you bring a coffee cup or mug?
I don't want to
advertise.
I don't want to advertise Starbucks here. So I've got a cup I've got a can of coffee beverage from a corporation that shall not be named. How about that?
Okay.
I'm not doing product placement.
Fair enough.
Well, I know you have your own company too, so maybe you'll bring a mug from your own company from what you do.
Yeah, I found that interesting.
That'd be a conflict. No, I'm not getting into. Yeah, but I'm not getting into product placement for myself. Then I look like I don't care about justice. I just care about making money, and that's not what I'm about. So
we know that, Representative LaGrand. I wish you could come back and talk with us about these court fees and surcharges that are, really just serve to be like a debtor's prison for many people caught up in the nets of the court. And I do want to give a shout out to Facebooker Stephen Boyle, who has made several comments on the Political Coffee Facebook page. I encourage everybody to check them out. And he asked Representative LaGrand if you think that universal basic income could solve some of these social, ills connected with the criminal justice system.
Absolutely. I'm a firm advocate of the universal basic income. I think it would solve a lot of our problems. It'd be such an easy way to cut through the mess of affordable housing too. Like let people go find their own houses, right? I mean, like the government has a terrible track record of trying to do housing and failing. We got Cabrini Green in Chicago and all the projects. Like if you just let people give people, again, I don't know how long we got here, but like, again, to put this in political terms, I feel like about Ronald Reagan was when we started this myth that people without money were stupid and we needed to manage them. And like, if you gave poor people money, they were just going to blow it on crack. And that's a lie. It turns out if you give poor people money, they blow it on backpacks for their kids to go to school, and they blow it on rent, and they blow it on food, and they use the money for just the same things everybody else uses money for. And we got to stop patronizing people who need help and empowering them. And I think universal basic income is, look, I think the government needs to do two things. We need to really have an increased tax on the highest wage earners and people with the most wealth. And so we need to increase our taxes on the people at the top, and then give that money to the people on the lower end. And if we don't do that, eventually we're going to have a revolution. You know, we gotta do this now while we still can. I mean, I don't mean to be too dark about it, but you know, when you're living in a world where 38 people have half the world's wealth, at some point somebody's going to ask, where are those 38 people?
Right. Well, I applaud you on your real talk, because I think you're right on target, no pun intended, in connection with the gun dialogue earlier. But you know, there will be a revolution in this country if things don't change the way things are going. And you have definitely got to come back and talk with us about other efforts. Now, you're in the you know, you've been called on to write an op-ed, or you've written an op-ed, and you've done testimony. You've got some things going on in the media. How can people find out about your thoughts on these different issues, where you're showing up in the news?
Yeah, you know, I'm old time. Twitter doesn't give you enough characters. So if people want to really follow what I'm about, Facebook is the best way to do it. Just look up David LaGrand on Facebook. And my personal page is where I put all this stuff, and then my staff tries to put it up on the other pages. But the nice thing about my personal page is I can say whatever I want, right? There's none of those funny rules. Like, I can't, on my political page, like, I got to be careful what I say, because like, if I say like vote for Joe Biden by mistake on my political page, then I get in trouble with somebody, right? On my personal page, I can say whatever I want. So
okay, well, we definitely don't want you to get in trouble for that. I mean, what I will say about this is, I know I talked to Representative Mary Waters about starting a nonprofits to help fund people with, actually on the practical level, getting their records expunged. I mean, not a product placement, or I mean, I don't, maybe it's a product where the proceeds go towards expungement. I don't know. I'm throwing stuff out there. And then I will say, yeah, and then I will also say, you know, again, we applaud you for what you do. We know that being a public servant is, it's just like being a lawyer and doing the indigent defense work that we do. It's a thankless job. We don't get paid a lot of money doing this, but you gotta, it's a ministry. So we definitely applaud what you do, because that's what it's about. It's about making a difference for people. And, you know, to me, when you go into court, and I'm sure you've had this, and you get a person's conviction set aside, and it's just, you know, it's a relief for the person, but it's a relief when you're the lawyer. It's a relief for you too. You're helping to make a difference. You're helping people to be able to get a job and
it's that vicarious connection, you know? Yeah,
excel in their career. And so, you know, again, Representative LaGrand, we definitely salute you for your passion. I mean, you don't have to do what you're doing, but you're doing it. And so, you know, we thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I feel like I got the greatest job in the world, so I don't need thanks. I love being able to wake up in the morning and just try to make the world better. It's an amazing experience, and it's an amazing opportunity. I could not be happier than I am doing what I do.
Right. And, you know, I know you've been talking about scripture, and what comes to me when as far as the educational programming that I do is like Hosea 4:6, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So that's why it's important to get that knowledge out there. I know I've said it before. I'm going to say it again, because again, I'm not one to reinvent the wheel. If you haven't been set up to do the trainings for the judges, I'm definitely going to be pushing for you to be doing those trainings for the judges, for the attorneys, because I'm not one to reinvent the wheel. If you
Right.
you are the architect and one of the main architects, and you are a lawyer, I'm not one, while some of us are
Right.
figuring it out, we want to connect the dots, make it as simple
Yeah.
as possible. So, because I want, it's good. We do have evolution. We have an attorney general that's progressive. We have some prosecutors that are progressive, but we need
Yep.
the judges are the ones that make the call. So we need to
Yep.
take the message. We got to preach to the judge, and we got to
Yep.
connect you with the judges, because I don't want
And
to read.
Robin,
Yeah, I
and
don't wanna
Robin,
reinvent
you're
the
on
wheel.
fire. I love it. I love it.
she is,
And
she's a total firebrand. And Robin, not only is it about connecting the dots, we've got to connect them up with a noted authority. And who else except for Representative LaGrand, because I understand that you're the go-to guy when it comes
Right.
to all questions about the, Michigan Clean Slate Law, because it can be kind of confusing for judges and
Yeah.
lawyers.
Yeah, yep. I mean, any changes new. And yes, we took in a sense, because the old system was so narrow, and so that also made it simple, right? And widening it did make it more complicated. So a lot more people are going to be eligible, but yeah, all of a sudden you got to explain to people, oh, you can get a misdemeanor expunged in 3 years. Oh, you can get, one felony after 5, but you got to wait 7 for the second one, and so many of this and so many of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think Robin and I were on a call about this a while ago, and somebody said somebody needs to make a flow chart, and I almost chimed in and said, yeah, we made one about halfway through the legislative process, so we could explain this to other legislators. I'm like,
Wow.
here's what this looks like, and it is best explained with a flow chart. So you can be like, ask the question: do you have more than one felony? Go to this part of the flow chart. Do you have more than 4? Well, then you can't get anything done, right? Like going through a flow chart really does help. So we may actually, now that I'm saying that, I should dig up that flow chart and send it to you, Robin, at least.
Right, I know you
Because
did
it's not.
send me. Yeah, I
Yeah.
welcome that. I know you did send me some things through my assistant, and we definitely will share that. But the more knowledge that you have to
Yeah.
share with us, to share with our social media contacts, other lawyers,
Yeah.
judges, definitely, because I'm not one to reinvent the wheel. You get into court and you got to explain it to the judges, prosecutors,
Yep.
but the judge makes the ultimate call. So I'm like, we got to get to the judges. There
Yep.
are judges that have said to me before this, they've said, Robin, we want to make change, but they were hemmed up because of the prior legislation. Now they're not hemmed
Right.
up, but we want to make sure that they
They
have a
understand.
comprehension so they can do the right thing.
Absolutely. No, I think this is exciting, but there's going to be a learning curve, right? And
Right.
look, if we're going to help 1 million people here, that's a lot of people going to be going to be filing motions, right? Like I'm
Right.
a little worried that the court system is going to be underwater for a minute here at least, right? Especially since, again, just to throw out some numbers, I think we did an analysis just on marijuana. I think something like 60,000 people in Detroit are going to be eligible to get marijuana misdemeanors cleaned up off their record. And
Right.
there's no wait time for that. It can happen immediately. So
That's
it's not
10% of Detroit's population right now. I mean,
exactly.
that's amazing.
Well, that's why we needed to legalize it, right? When you got something everybody's using, at some point you just got to give up, right?
Right.
It's
Well,
like
marijuana is legal.
prohibition. Yeah, so anyway, yes, tons of people have been using weed for a long time, and tons of people have been getting caught for individual joints. Well, now they're all going to be able to get that expunged. But if they all can get it expunged on is it April 15th this starts, Robin? I think it might be, right? What's the effective date?
When you say, well, you mean for the new, I'm not understanding, because you're saying we know April 11th is the date for the new
April 11th.
legislation, but it's April 12th is a Monday. So it's a Monday.
Okay.
Monday
So,
would be when you actually could file.
Right. So that means April 12, in theory, 60,000 people could file in Detroit just on weed applications.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Like that's gonna cause a little bit of heartburn for some judges, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it is.
But,
And that's what courts are concerned about. But I have a question about this 2-year ramp up for the automatic expungements, December 30th, 2022.
Yeah.
People want to know, how do I make sure that I'm, catch that wave, that I'm going to be in that group of people
Sure.
that's going to get the automatic expungement? What kind of technology is being used to make sure that happens? Do you know?
Absolutely. So the answer on that is, and it's not a perfect answer because um, some 90-day misdemeanors do not get reported up into the lien
Right.
system. And so if we did this tomorrow, we couldn't catch, like, let's say David LaGrand got a misdemeanor in Detroit in 1985, and now he's living in Grand Rapids. Well, the Grand Rapids court isn't going to know, and there's no statewide court, no statewide data system that knows that he got a misdemeanor in 1985 in Detroit, right? So there's going to be some rough spots on the rollout, but the hope is that the what's called LEAN, the Law Enforcement Information Network, that keeps statewide track of all felonies and all misdemeanors above 93 days. And so at least for those, and we hope by the 2 years or so we can capture the lower ones, but we hope that this happens literally automatically so that the answer to that question is the same as the answer to the question of how do I get points off my license? You don't have to do anything. You just wait. It just happens, right?
Okay, great.
So
This
yeah,
drops
so
off automatic.
yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Okay.
Well,
Well, we know
yep.
you gotta go. We don't want to keep
I do.
you.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this public service. Like, I know you're not getting rich. I know you're not getting rich by broadcasting legal information and political information on social media. But thank you so much for doing what you do to get the word out. Both of you, thank you. I know you are working on this hard. I thank. So I mean, my gratitude to you for working so hard on being voices for justice. I really can't say how much I appreciate it. Love you for
Well,
it.
welcome
But
and
thank you. Yeah, right
Kudos
back
to you.
at you. God bless you for all that you do. And this has been Political Coffee with, I got my U of M mug. Shout out to U of M, University of Chicago too. So we know we've got to have you back, but thank you for your time. We know time is precious. So you have a blessed day. Be safe, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks you so much. Take care now.
Great. See you, Rep. LaGrand.
See you later.
Bye.
Take care. Keep fighting. Thank you.
Keep fighting a good fight.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Well, that was just great. Yes. So, and
Wow.
I know we've got tomorrow, we've got Sheriff. I don't know, Tracy, this is a busy time right now. We've got Sheriff Jerry Clayton tomorrow at 1 o'clock talking about, he, as I said, yeah, talking about use of force. He can expand on what to do when stopped by the police, the cards that he created, when I reached out to him back in November 2014. The George Floyd scenario with the Derek Chauvin trial. There was some stuff.
Have you been watching it? Have you been watching the Chauvin trial?
I've been watching it as much as I can because, like you, we are both practicing attorneys. So we do have clients with work that has to be done. So I watch it as when I can. I get highlights when I'm not able to. I also talk to some folks that watch it and give me their input, their insight. So folks, this is Political Coffee with Robin and Tracy. We want you to make sure we're on YouTube. So make sure that you that you share, like, subscribe, and we got that website we're working on. So when we get the website, make sure that you subscribe, get involved with the website. We're going to have merchandise that we're selling. I'm sure we'll talk about, again, I'm looking at doing some stuff as far as a nonprofit. I know Tracy, her angle, she's talked about doing more with the juvenile expungements. I'm talking about the adults, kids are my passion. I'm sure I'll be involved. But again, this is not about one person. This is a movement. So if you are an attorney and you're watching this, and maybe you're not in the trenches like Tracy and I, maybe you're in corporate America and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get on this. There's always ways for you to get involved. You can commit to doing a certain amount of expungements pro bono per month. You can also, when we get things set up as far as a nonprofit, you can contribute so that we can help the attorneys that are in the trenches. Shout out to the attorneys from the Wayne County Criminal Defense Bar. Shout out to the attorneys that are working with Tracy in the juvenile court, representing kids and parents. Because again, folks, this is not, we are not getting rich off of this, okay? I'm here to testify, y'all. This is not about the money, okay? Because if y'all saw, yes, we did get a raise. Praises to Lillian Diallo and Gabi Silver for helping to get the things.
Yeah, you guys got a raise and on the criminal division side, but in the juvenile side, we didn't get squat. So,
Yeah,
you know,
so
but
it's
even though you got a raise, it was still, you know,
So y'all, see y'all, you know, I just want to let y'all know, lawyers get a bad rap. Most lawyers are good lawyers. I mean, yes, are there some folks out there that are lazy, that don't care? Yes, in every profession, doctors, nurses, police, there are some folks that are lazy. We are not lazy. Most people are hard workers, but we need support. I also will put a shout out, if you are somebody who has really good administrative skills, let us know that have some ideas about how we can streamline this, because there are some things administratively that can be done, so then you can help the lawyers to be more effective, because this is about helping people. When I'm listening to people, and Tracy has done this too, when we do these clinics and we listen to these people, either whether it's a juvenile record or an adult record, and it just breaks my heart to hear people telling me that they have applied for a job, they go through the process, they're working a job, and then they do a lien search, and then they're released from the job because of their criminal record or the juvenile record. And it just, you know, Michigan, and particularly I can speak to what I know, being in Wayne County, Washtenaw County, Ypsilanti, Detroit. It's a depressed environment. Benton Harbor, I got relatives on the west side of the state. Benton Harbor, Flint. We have got to be better, folks. You know, we're in a pandemic. We have so many different layers. We got to be better with what we do. You know, as Christians.
Robin, isn't it troubling though to hear that State Representative David LaGrand is term limited, and you know, he says that today that there are 0 lawyers in the Michigan Senate. So you know, we need more lawyers to run.
Right.
I think for office, and
it's a call to action.
Yeah, it is a call to action, and I think people should know. Robin, are you still working on compiling like a clearinghouse list of lawyers who are interested in helping out with this expungement movement? Because you know, it takes a village. It really does.
Right. It does.
Of lawyers to make this happen. You know, because I keep seeing the same group of lawyers over and over again at these expungement clinics. And you touched on something, you know, when I was in law school, I worked for the Legal Aid and Defender Association in the private attorney involvement unit. And one of the things that I did was reach out to these big silk stocking law firms to get involved in pro bono. And you know, a lot of times the solo practitioners or the lawyers that work in the smaller, even the mid-sized firms, they just don't have the time to vote to this effort. But some of the lawyers in the big firms, I mean, their firms support pro bono publico, so they may even, you know, do these expungement cases pro bono for free.
Right.
So how can people get in touch with you? Are you collecting names through Robin Legal?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out to me. I mean, my office number is 734-769-0001, 734-769-00, so 3 zeros and a 1. I have Robin Legal, ROBYN Legal 2019 @gmail. And I have my legal assistant, Ed Dance. He was accepted recently to University of Wisconsin Law School. I've got him from now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we've got him from now through August. As I said, if you are somebody that has mad administrative skills, because it takes a village, it's lawyers, it's judges, it's progressive prosecutors. I coined the phrase progressive prosecutors. It's you know, we need folks. This is a movement. This is not about one person. This is about giving people the opportunity to redeem. You know, Tracy, you and I last year, we called it the Redemption Coalition, a coalition of lawyers, state reps, state senators, lay people, in terms of changing. We want to change the landscape in Michigan. Michigan, I love Michigan. Even though you and I might be critical about some of the things we see in Michigan, we love Michigan. We're born and raised in Michigan. I love Michigan.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here. But, you know, we got to shout out to the late State Representative Isaac Robinson, who was so instrumental in getting this expungement movement going and getting it across the finish line, as well as Representative Sherry Gagdagnogo. She's still with us. She's not in the legislature, unfortunately, though, anymore, because she too was term limited. But you know, I also have to give a shout out to,
Sherry is doing that thing. Representative Tanisha Yancey. I mean, this is bigger than one person. I mean, Representative LaGrand, Attorney Stuart Friedman. You know, I'm sorry I interrupted. You had some other folks that I think you were going to list out.
Well, yeah, I mean, Stuart Friedman. Oh, we had hoped to get him on the show today. We couldn't, but hopefully in the future. Listen, Stuart Friedman has shown up to so many of these expungement forums talking about pardons, which is a fascinating topic in and of itself. I mean, Robin, you and I, we worked to sign off on a correspondence to POTUS. Our former POTUS went to the White House to Jared Kushner to work toward getting Detroit's former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick released. And we know what happened. He did get released. And, you know, Representative Sherry Gagdagnogo was very instrumental with that too, along with, you know, there was another group as well. So, you know, kudos to you on that. But this is something that, well, I was talking about Stuart Friedman. I mean, he is just an expert extraordinaire on pardons.
Well,
and
Tracy, so I did reach out to Stuart. So I reached out to Stuart. He said he gave me a date. Because I've got, for Robin Legal, I've got Sergeant Eugene Rush coming up on the 14th. Stuart has given me a date on the 21st. So, you know, I wanted to check with you about your scheduling to see if you can join us for 5 o'clock on the 21st, so we can get, again, this is a movement. This is a movement. This is a ministry. We've got to really work to help people. And, you know, yes, folks, we're in a pandemic. If you watch the news, I don't know what to say. It's depressing. You watching the George Floyd, they keep looping the video over and over again. I'm traumatized as a Black person. I know that I got my white friends. We all Asian, Hispanic, we all traumatized watching it. But it's like, you know, maybe we need to keep seeing it until everybody wakes up that this is a great awakening. You know, I was baptized in the traditional church. I also am involved with the metaphysical church. They talk about this is a shift that's going on in the planet. The old church is Exodus in the Bible. You know, you got to stay shut in and pray and meditate. The new church this is a shift that we're going to go through some rocky things. We're going to have some losses. We're going to have some wins, but ultimately I believe we're going to get to a better place, but it takes a team. This is not one person. This is a movement. And so Tracy, I salute you for what you've been doing. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, you know, I think I'm more on the media end, actually, although I haven't given up my law practice. I'm, you know, exclusively practicing in the family courts in Michigan, in the Tri-County area, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County. All the judges know me. So I haven't given that up. I'm dedicated to it. And juvenile justice and neglect and abuse cases, that's, you know, really, those are my home courts. But I agree with you, Robin. There isn't a way going on in this country. There's a reckoning. And I want to address something that you said a moment ago. I think we're going out in about 4 minutes. But, you know, people have been saying on social media, I just can't watch this Derek Chauvin trial on the George Floyd homicide. It just traumatizes me. It makes me have PTSD. I just feel terrible. white people are saying this and Black people are saying. I'm saying do not turn away. The experts on social justice are saying that we need to watch this because this is what's going to help us make change, okay? If you close your eyes to it, shut down, ignore it, this is what perpetuates systemic and structural racism and implicit bias and all the problems in law enforcement. I'm so glad we're going to have Washtenaw County Sheriff Jerry L. Clayton on tomorrow. Not only is he the Washtenaw County Sheriff, which is pretty big, but he's also a member of a national criminal justice think tank called the Council on Criminal Justice. And we are going to be talking with him about that and use of force. And Robin, your extraordinary programs called What to Do When Stopped by the Police and, qualified immunity. We're going to be talking about all of these issues tomorrow at 1 o'clock here on Political Coffee, and you can watch it live on the Political Coffee Facebook page. It's going to be uploaded later to YouTube because these days people like to watch at their leisure,
Right.
And so we have it for you. And we hope that you've been enjoying the program. This represents episode 24 today with State Representative David LaGrand, and we hope that you keep watching because we're going to keep providing the information to you to empower yourselves, empower your families, and empower the entire country.
Right. Like we said, folks, share, subscribe, spread the word. Political Coffee with Robin and Tracy, birthday twins, Scorpio power. That I have a friend, Marsha. I probably will be getting Marsha either on Robin Legal Political Coffee. She's a doctor. She and I are both Scorpio. She's a little bit later in November. She's a Scorpio. She's a doctor. We're going to be talking about women's health issues. She's a fertility doctor, fibroids. We're going to talk to her. Also, shout out to Joan Mann, who was also, we had a group, Sister Friends. So, and we created it at the University of Chicago because Black women were feeling left out when we were at University of Chicago. The men, they had their sports. And even though I was an athlete, I was like, no, Black women, again, you and I, we keep going back, Black woman wisdom with America. It's like the negative side of it. I go negative and I go positive. The negative side of it is that the Black woman, to me, I believe, is the mule of society. But even
that's
still,
what Malcolm X said. That's what Malcolm X said.
Even still, we are the mule, but we are the saviors of this society. Black woman wisdom. If it wasn't for us, you would not have Biden and you would not have Kamala. I know I have people that are Trumpsters and and you have your viewpoint, and I have relatives, friends, we'll get some of those folks to come in and share their viewpoints. I know everybody is not on the same, they're not on the same political team, but I look at it, it's like a football game. We are all American, and we're on a ship. This is a ship, okay? Everybody that has reason, we want America to succeed, okay? Even though, you may say I'm like Angela Davis, power to the people, all that stuff. Look, I want America to succeed, okay? You know why? Because you and I are both on this boat. We don't want America to tank. We don't want America to go down because we on this trip, our friends, family, children, we want America to succeed. America has so much potential, just like Michigan has so much potential. And it's like, we've got to get folks, even if you're in different sides of the aisles, to come together, look at our commonalities and pray on it, meditate, ask God, how can we make this a movement to move us further? Even if I know people out there's some of you that are atheists and agnostic. Okay, even if you don't go with the Christian route, talk about meditation and vibes and energy. Okay, we can go.
A lot of people are spiritual. A lot of people are spiritual, and you talked about the metaphysical church. But what I wanted to mention is that we also have this the rest of the month features a fantastic lineup. There's a lot going on in Detroit politics. Last week we had a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, ML Elric, who's running for Detroit City Council. We have another candidate who's running in that 4th district race. coming
Right.
on. His name is Tosin Knight. He's the Dean of Culture at Western International High School. We have Royce Kinnebrew, who's also running for Detroit City Council. We're trying to get retired Judge Virgil C. Smith on the show as well. But we also have Joe Novotny coming on. He was at the Capitol on January 6th. Some people said it was an insurrection. I say it was a riot happened at the Capitol. He was there. We're going to be interviewing him on April 17th. I mean, that's coming up next week. Robin, you talked about Republicans. We also interview Republicans. I myself am an independent. Austin Chenge, who is running for governor. Right now, the race is actually in 2022. He's challenging Governor Gretchen Whitmer. We're going to be talking with him on the 24th. You know, we might get John James on this show. Got to line in on him. So, you know, Political Coffee is bringing you the news and the views, and
In
we
real
hope you've been enjoying
time.
it.
Right, in real time. And you
In real
know,
time.
Joseph Novotny, we paged together at 16, and he got that political bug. He stuck with it. He stayed in DC. The insurrection happened, and then he retired. And you know, he's going to talk about too. He's training the first African American House reading clerk. So he's doing some exciting things. You know, we've got some other folks that we're going to be reaching out to about coming on the show. Folks, this you know, Political Coffee, we've got some nuances, we've got some interviews with some exciting people. You see it first here with Political Coffee. So yeah, so it's we definitely appreciate you guys for taking your time, and whether it's live or recorded, spread the word, and everybody have a blessed day. So Political Coffee with Robin and Tracy. Yep.
Take
All right.
care. See you
You
next
too.
week, Robin.
Yep. See you. Well,
Oh,
tomorrow.
no, tomorrow.
Sheriff Clayton. Yep.
Well, tomorrow is next week, technically. So you know we're lawyers. You know we're lawyers.
Yep. See you tomorrow. Okay, everybody
see
be
you
blessed.
tomorrow.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Robin.
Bye, Tracy.